発音記号のまとめ。母音、
E, need, reveal, field. E, city, react, company. I, hit, village, build. I, any, set, bread. A, back, answer, imagine. A, father, calm, palm. A, luck, love, country. A, cause, fall, law. Put, pull, wolf. Cool, prove, choose. About, famous, continue. Term, turn, first.
二重母音、
A, take, pain, day. I, life, bright, eye. Oi, noise, point, choice. Ow, count, sound, allow. O, stone, grow, shoulder. Ear, dear, mere, appear. Air, care, air, where. R, part, heart, farm. Or, sort, worn, course. Tour, cure, sure.
子音、
P, pretty, happen, stop. B, become, observe, job. T, table, little, minute. D, digital, sudden, add. K, kite, quick, unique. G, grade, guess, ugly. F, field, different, physical. V, value, level, arrive. Th, theory, method, health. Though, other, together. S, cell, science, base. Z, zone, magazine, refuse. Sh, should, discussion, issue. J, usual, measure, decision. H, hill, heaven, behind. Ch, nature, kitchen, teach. J, just, reject, bridge. M, move, common, inform. N, name, honest, funny. Ng, king, along, tongue. L, believe, dollar, fall. R, road, terrible, carry. W, wooden, queen, language. Y, yet, young, familiar. 1. Tomatoes first grew in South America. Then Central Americans began to grow and eat them. The name tomato came from tomatal, the Mexican name for the plant. The Spanish brought tomatoes to Europe in the early 16th century. At first, people in Europe grew tomatoes only because they were pretty. 2. Then Italians began to grow them for food. In the 18th century, English people took tomatoes from Europe to North America. But in those days, most Americans would not eat them. They believed that the plant was poisonous and bad for the health. 3. There was a man called Robert Johnson. When he was in Europe, he enjoyed tomatoes very much. He knew that they were not poisonous. He wanted other Americans to enjoy them too. Johnson returned to America in 1830, and one day he told everyone, "On September 26th, I will eat as many tomatoes as possible." 4. On that day, about 2,000 people came to watch. At noon, Johnson ate the first tomato. He didn't stop eating tomatoes. People cried. In the end, there were no tomatoes left. People said, "We were wrong." By 1835, tomatoes were often sold in American food shops. Today, tomatoes are grown in many countries. They grow on almost any kind of ground.
5. Beethoven was a coffee lover. He was also very particular about food. He limited his food and he drank only wine, mineral water, and coffee. He said to his servants, "You must make my coffee with exactly 60 coffee beans." Then he counted the beans one by one. I hear that the only thing he had for breakfast was his cup of coffee. I wonder if Beethoven's bitter expression was due to his coffee habit.
6. Climbing the most difficult mountains needs a very special mental condition. All of the parts of the body must work together smoothly and quietly. Each part of the body must feel what is happening in the other parts. There is no room for thinking about what time it is. There is no room for thinking about how one looks. All thinking must focus on what is happening at that moment. The mind and the body must become one.
7. Saint Valentine lived in Rome in the 3rd century. As he had a tender heart, he felt sorry for the poor and the sick. He worked hard to save them in many ways. He also loved children very much. He gave them presents with letters in which words of love were written. One day, Saint Valentine was caught and put into prison. Finally, he was killed on February 14th, 269. Saint Valentine's Day recalls his tragic death. He was called the Saint of Love, and people said that even birds exchanged their songs of love on his shoulders. 8. Today, sweethearts give cards to one another. A picture is usually printed on the card. In Japan on this day, it is the custom for girls to give chocolates to the boys whom they love. These chocolates generally have the shape of a heart. Some people, however, present others with chocolates only as a joke. Of course, in this case, they do not love them.
9. The history of music is very old. No one knows when and how music began, but people have always loved it. Perhaps people can't live without music. Do animals and plants like music too? One day, a woman named Mrs. Young read a very interesting story in the newspaper. A professor found that his plants became stronger when they listened to music. At first, she thought it was a joke, but she wanted to try it. 10. She built 2 rooms in her garden. Then she put the same kind of vegetables in both rooms. The temperature of the rooms was the same. There were no noises in the 2 rooms. Music was played in one room. The other room was silent. After only 24 hours, she was very surprised. The vegetables in the music room became much taller than the vegetables in the silent room. Today, many scientists say animals and plants enjoy music too. Like us, animals and plants need beautiful music.
11. Everyone agrees that koalas are cute, but how much do we really know about them? Koala is an Australian word which means animal that does not drink water. Koalas don't drink because they get all the water they need by eating the leaves of eucalyptus trees. Koalas sleep in the daytime and move around only at night, so no one knows how many koalas live in Australia. Koalas spend most of their lives in eucalyptus trees, but over 200 years people have cut down many of those trees to build houses or make farms. In fact, 80% of the koala's living area has disappeared. 12. Because eucalyptus trees are both homes and food for koalas, koalas have to look for food in other places. When they go into people's gardens to look for food, they sometimes meet animals like dogs and cats. They may attack koalas, but another danger koalas have is cars. Many koalas are hit by cars every year. Koalas are also very weak. The loss of eucalyptus trees is stressful for them. If they can't have enough trees, koalas become sick or blind. Some koalas can't have babies because of stress. So now there are not as many koalas as before. Many groups in the world are working to save koalas. If you want to do something for koalas, you can join such groups.
13. Einstein was one of the greatest scientists in history. However, he was not thought very bright when he was a child. His teachers said Einstein has no sense of discipline. When he was 15, he was thrown out of school. But a few years later, he was allowed to study mathematics and physics at a university in Zurich. But even at the university, he didn't attend classes. He was often in trouble with his teachers. He constantly argued with them. One of them told him, "You are smart, quite smart, but you have one problem. You never let anyone tell you anything." 14. When he finished university, he couldn't get a job. Perhaps because none of his teachers recommended him for a job. Finally, he found one in the Swiss Patent Office. One of his jobs was writing descriptions of new inventions. Thanks to this job, he learned how to write clearly and simply. In 1905, when he was only 26, he published an article in a scientific magazine. This article was about a theory which he called the theory of relativity. He became very famous for this theory. All his life he lived very simply, and he was not interested in money, power, or fame. He said, "I can never understand why so many people admire me. I know that most of them have never read anything I wrote and that they don't understand my ideas." Then he asked, "Are they crazy or am I?"
15. A long time ago, people lived in small villages where they all knew each other. They could call each other by their first name only. As the villages grew into small towns, it became necessary to find some ways to tell them apart. For example, if two people were named Matthew, you had to add other words, Matthew by the wood or Matthew in the field, which told you where each Matthew lived. In time, these places became surnames. Today, wood, woods, field, fields, hill, forest, brooks, bank, lane, and lake are common English surnames. 16. Another way of telling apart two people of the same first name was to add the person's skill or job. For example, different Andrews in town became Andrew the cook, Andrew the shepherd, Andrew the baker, etc. Today, these became Andrew Cook, Andrew Shepherd, and Andrew Baker. A third origin of surnames was to call people by their father's name. In those days, it was a man's world. No one was called by his or her mother's name. If there were 3 Johns in a village, they had names like John, son of Richard, John, son of Jack, or John, son of Robert. These became Richardson, Jackson, and Robertson today. Others like these are Johnson, Wilson, Williamson, and Thompson.
17. How do you decide what you are going to buy in a supermarket? Do you look in the refrigerator and make a list? Do you think about what you want to cook and then buy the food you need? Even if you do these things, the supermarket makes some of the decisions for you. There are some people who have studied how to make people buy more food in a supermarket. They do all kinds of things that you do not even notice. 18. For example, 1. The food that everybody must buy, like bread, milk, and vegetables, is spread all over the store. You have to walk to find these things. 2. The expensive food is in packages with bright-colored pictures. It is put at eye level so you see it and want to buy it. 3. The things that you have to buy anyway are usually put on a higher or lower shelf. 4. However, candy and other things that children like are on lower shelves. One study showed that when a supermarket moved 4 products from floor to eye level, it sold 78% more. 19. Another study showed that after a person has been in a supermarket for 30 minutes, she or he spends 50 cents every minute. For example, if someone stays 40 minutes, the supermarket has $5 more. So the store has a comfortable temperature in summer and winter, and it plays soft music. It is a pleasant place for people to stay and spend more money. Some stores have red or pink lights over the meat so the meat looks redder. They put light green paper around lettuce and put apples in red plastic bags. So be careful in the supermarket. You may go home with a bag of food you were not planning to buy. The supermarket, not you, decided you should buy it.
20. There was once a man who made his living by taking people and things across a river. But his boat was so small that he could take only one person or one thing at a time. One day, the man was given 3 things to take across the river: a wolf, a goat, and a big basket of cabbages. Because he could take only one thing at a time, he had to leave 2 things behind and come back for them, and that meant trouble. If I take the cabbages and leave the wolf and goat behind, the wolf will eat the goat, he thought. And if I take the wolf and leave the goat with the cabbages, the goat will eat the cabbages. 21. Of course, it was possible for him to take the goat across first and leave the cabbages with the wolf. The wolf would not eat them. But then what? He thought that he could bring either the wolf or the cabbages across the river on his second trip, but then something would be eaten while he went back for the last thing. There must be a certain way to get the 3 things across the river, one at a time, without leaving the wolf and the goat, or the goat and the cabbages together, he said to himself. After a while, he had the answer. 22. He didn't tie up the wolf so that it couldn't eat the goat. He didn't hang the basket of cabbages from a tree so that the goat couldn't get them. Then what did he do? First, the man took the goat across the river. Then he went back and took the big basket of cabbages across. But when he left the cabbages, he put the goat into the boat and took it back across the river. When he reached this side of the river, the man put the wolf into the boat and left the goat behind. Then he took the wolf across and left it with the cabbages. Finally, he went back and brought the goat across again.
23. Many people think that English is the most common language in the world. Is this true? If we are speaking about mother tongues, Chinese and Spanish come before English. However, in terms of the number of people who speak English as their second or third language, English is clearly the most widely spoken. First of all, in international conferences, English is the main language. There are interpreters to translate the speeches, but these days, English is certainly more important than other languages, and most people understand it. Research papers, academic magazines, and books are written mainly in English. 24. Secondly, the language of the Internet is English. There are many home pages on the Internet, and if you want people in the world to read your home page, then you should write it in English. Many people whose mother tongue is not English read home pages written in this language. Thirdly, English is now used as the language of international business. A lot of companies which trade with foreign companies are now using English not only outside, but also inside the office. Fourthly, think of the culture of young people. Movies and music are provided mainly in English. Young people are exposed to English more and more these days, and English is quickly spreading all over the world.
25. Most of us use salt every day. We think nothing of it. But salt was not common in the ancient world. Only rich people could use it. Greek tales tell of people who used no salt in their food because they did not live near the sea. Salt was used as money. Roman workers were once paid all or part of their wages in salt. The English word salary comes from the Latin word salarium. It means salt money. In ancient China, salt was almost as valuable as gold. In Europe, before refrigerators were invented, salt was used to preserve meat and fish. Only rich people could have salt. In some parts of Africa today, salt is taken to market in blocks. At the market, the blocks are broken into very small pieces for sale. There are still people in some parts of the world who have never seen or tasted salt.
26. Andorra, one of the smallest countries in the world, is high in the mountains between France and Spain. The country covers only about 180 square miles. That is about half the size of New York City. About 75,000 people live in Andorra. High Rocky Mountains surround Andorra. Until the 1930s, it was difficult to reach the country. Until that time, people in Andorra lived the same way they had for centuries. Most people in Andorra worked as farmers or as shepherds. Things did not change quickly. When roads were built from France and Spain to Andorra in the 1930s, life became faster. Tourists began to visit the small country. These tourists brought in a lot of money to spend while visiting. Many people in Andorra found new jobs in shops or hotels. These changes helped to keep young people in Andorra. There were many more jobs than before the roads were built. 27. Today, tourists bring in 80 to 90% of Andorra's income. More than 1 million people visit each year. They come to see the mountains covered with rocks. They enjoy the quiet way of life. Most people are also interested in the ancient buildings. There are many shops for tourists to look in. Clothes, watches, jewelry, wines, and other things are sold at low prices in Andorra. Import fees are low, so tourists enjoy shopping. Most of the businesses in Andorra are owned by the people there. There are not many foreign businesses. Some people still farm and keep sheep, but most are now involved with the tourist business. 28. Andorra has an unusual system. It is based on ancient laws and rules. The country is controlled by a Spanish bishop and the President of France. They are called the Princes of Andorra. They have equal power and must agree before any change is made in Andorra. They are paid for their services in the same way as before. Every 2 years, the Bishop of Spain receives 6 hams, 6 cheeses, 12 hens, and $8. The President of France is paid $2 every 2 years.
29. One of my most interesting experiences was swimming in the Great Salt Lake. The lake covers an area larger than the state of Rhode Island. The surprising fact is that although the lake is far from any ocean, and although it gets its water from rivers which have so little salt as to taste sweet, the lake is about 6 times as salty as the ocean. For a while I floated around, but soon I wanted to stand. Then I was surprised. I couldn't stand on the bottom. The brine was very heavy and holding me up. 30. After swimming for a few minutes, I made my next mistake. I opened my eyes underwater. I expected that I would feel a little pain when the water got into my eyes, but I was not prepared to have that kind of terrible pain. It was so painful that I couldn't keep my eyes open. Of course, that was the last time I tried to swim in the Great Salt Lake. After that experience, I understand why there are no fish in the Great Salt Lake. Fish can't close their eyes.
31. A long time ago, there lived a merchant in London with his beautiful teenage daughter. In those days, if a person borrowed money and couldn't return it, he had to go to prison. Unfortunately, this merchant borrowed a lot of money from an ugly moneylender. Though the moneylender was old and ugly, he wanted very much to marry the merchant's beautiful daughter. So he said to the merchant, "I will cancel your debt if you agree to give me your daughter." 32. Neither the merchant nor his daughter liked this idea, but they didn't know what else to do. One day, the ugly moneylender said to them, "Let's play a game of chance. I will put a black stone and a white stone into this empty bag." Then he looked at the merchant's beautiful daughter and said, "You will have to pick out one of the stones. If you choose the black stone, you will marry me, and your father's debt will be canceled. If you choose the white stone, you can stay with your father, and the debt will still be canceled. But listen, if you don't pick out a stone, your father will be thrown into prison. So choose carefully, my girl." 33. The merchant and his daughter had no choice, so they agreed to try it. The 3 people were standing on a path in the merchant's garden. There were many small stones on the path. The moneylender picked up 2 small stones and quickly put them into his bag. The girl was looking carefully at him, and she noticed that he picked up 2 black stones and put them into his bag. Then the moneylender said to the girl, "Now pick out one of the stones." Imagine that you were standing on that path in the merchant's garden. What would you do if you were the girl? The girl put her hand into the bag and took out a stone. Without looking at it, she dropped it on the path. The stone was lost among the other stones. "Oh, I'm sorry. How careless I am," she said. "But it's all right. If you look into the bag, you will be able to tell which stone I took by the color of the one that is left."
34. A wise judge was once sent to prison in a tower by an unjust king. People all over the country loved the wise judge very much, but they didn't love the king. So the king was displeased by the great affection. The tower was very high, and the king told the judge to spend all his life there quite alone. There was no hope of escape. One night, when he was looking out of the window, he saw his wife at the foot of the tower. She was crying bitterly. 35. The judge said, "Don't cry, my dear. Listen carefully to what I say. Go and bring back a scarab, a little butter, some silk thread, a heavy cord, and a rope. If you bring these things, I may be able to escape from here." His wife left, and in an hour she came back with the things which her husband told her to bring. The judge said from above, "Put a little butter on the head of the scarab, tie the silk thread around its body, and put it on the wall with its head upwards." 36. His wife did all this very carefully. The scarab, which is very fond of butter, smelled the butter and thought that the butter was on the wall above, so it began to climb upwards. The judge waited anxiously for the scarab to come up to him. When it came near, he picked it up and removed the thread from its body. To the lower end of the silk thread, his wife now tied the heavy cord, and to the end of the heavy cord the piece of rope. The judge then pulled up the silk, then the cord, and at last the rope. He then tied the rope in the tower and went out through the window. He climbed down the rope. There his wife waited for him. She was not only pleased that he escaped, but greatly surprised that a poor scarab could carry out such an important task.
37. No one knows for sure just how old kites are, but we know that they were used a long time ago. Greek stories tell of kites 4 centuries before Christ. In Korean legend, they were used in the war. It is said that a general put a light on a kite and it looked like a new star to his army. This star was a sign of good luck from the heavens. 25 centuries ago, kites were well known in China. Probably these first kites were made of wood, or they were covered with silk because silk was in use at that time. About 5 centuries later, the Chinese learned how to make paper from vegetables. This was used as a cover for early kites, too. 38. Early kites were made for many purposes. In China, they were used to carry ropes across rivers. Then the ropes were tied down and bridges were hung from them. Legend tells of one general who flew musical kites over the enemy. The enemy ran away because they believed the sounds were the warning of angels. Legend tells of kites which carried men, too. These were used to carry men behind the enemy or to spy on the enemy. Later, people flew kites for fun in China. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, kites of different shapes were made. Kites were made to look like men, birds, and animals. Some were very beautiful. When we hear the word kite, we remember great names and events. For example, Benjamin Franklin used a kite to prove that lightning is electricity. With such a great history, we will continue to enjoy flying kites.
39. One day a ventriloquist came into a restaurant with his dog. He ordered a steak. The waiter was very surprised when the dog said, "Bring me a steak, too." Now there was another man at the same table. The man was very rich, but he was not so bright. He dropped his knife and stared at the dog. Soon the waiter set one steak in front of the owner of the dog. Then he set another steak on the floor beside the dog. They began to eat. Next, the owner of the dog said, "Waiter, bring me a glass of wine." "Bring me a glass of water," the dog added. 40. Everyone around them was watching this strange scene. "Hey, please sell your dog," said the rich man after a moment. "I've never seen such a clever animal." But the owner answered, "This fellow is not for sale. He is my best friend. We can't live without each other." Then the dog said, "That is true. Please don't sell me." The rich man spread $1,000 on the table. Then the owner of the dog thought for a while and said, "The dog is yours." The rich man was very happy and started to leave with the dog. But when they reached the door, the dog angrily said these words, "I thought you were my friend, but you've sold me to a stranger. I'll never speak another word again."
41. Clocks as we know them were probably developed by very religious people in Europe in the 13th century. They needed to know the exact time so they could meet together in church. By the 1700s, people had clocks and watches that were accurate to the minute. Some clocks were very beautiful. They had complicated moving parts. Some clocks had figures of people or animals that moved every hour or quarter hour. Other clocks played music. The movement of the parts is very interesting to see if you open one of these old clocks. 42. Today's clocks and watches have quartz crystals inside of them. They are very accurate. Watches today can be traditional or digital. Digital watches don't have hands but numbers on their displays. Some watches are very complicated. They keep the time for at least 2 time zones. They have timers, alarms, radios, and even very small televisions. Some watches will count your heartbeat while you're jogging, then tell you how far you ran when you finish. People in different places think about time differently. In some cultures, time is very important. People make plans and follow them closely. They meet someone at a certain time and place. In fact, people may think it is rude to come late. In other cultures, people are more relaxed about time. They don't think it rude to come late. These are 2 different ways of thinking about time.
43. Editors of newspapers and magazines often go to extremes to provide their readers with unimportant facts and statistics. Last year, a journalist had been instructed by a well-known magazine to write an article on the president's palace in a new African republic. When the article arrived, the editor read only the first sentence, and he refused to publish it. The article began, "Hundreds of steps lead to the high wall which surrounds the president's palace." The editor at once sent the journalist a telegram. The telegram instructed the journalist to find out the exact number of steps and the height of the wall. 44. The journalist immediately tried to obtain these important facts, but it took him a long time to send them. Meanwhile, the editor was getting impatient, for the magazine would soon go to press. He sent the journalist 2 urgent telegrams, but he received no reply. He sent another telegram. The editor informed the journalist that if he did not reply, soon he would be fired. When the journalist again failed to reply, the editor reluctantly published the article as the journalist had originally written it. A week later, the editor received a telegram from the journalist. The poor man had been arrested. He had been sent to prison. However, he had at last been allowed to send a telegram. In the telegram, he informed the editor that he had been arrested while he was counting the 1,084 steps leading to the wall which surrounded the president's palace.
45. I have traveled to so many interesting places in the world. However, this was one of the most exciting experiences for me. I stayed in a hotel which was built of salt. The unique hotel stands alone on a huge salt desert in Bolivia. It is about 3,700 meters above the sea and is probably the largest salt bed in the world with an area of about 12,000 square kilometers. A long time ago, there was no salt desert, but later the ocean floor rose up and mountains were created. So a lot of seawater was left in the mountains. It made a lake. Then the lake became dry. A salt desert was left. The Salt Hotel is very strange. Beds, tables, chairs, everything is made from salt blocks. There is no electricity. The hotel uses the natural heat of the sun. During the day, the sun makes the blocks of salt warm, and it still keeps the rooms warm and comfortable at night.
46. One of the most important instruments of body language is the eyes. Your eyes can often show more information than just words. For example, Keith, an American high school boy, learned an interesting thing that the eyes can show. I had a teacher who graded very strictly on classroom discussion, Keith said. He seemed to have a supernatural power to know just when I didn't have the answers. I couldn't understand why he could read my mind. 47. Then I suddenly found out that when I didn't know an answer, I would try not to look at him. When I knew the answer, I always looked straight back at him. From that moment, I taught myself to look him in the eye, especially when I didn't know the answer. That helped me a lot and really saved my life in his classroom. 48. Keith's story shows us that many people, even some police officers, believe that eye contact is a good test of guessing people's feelings. It seems that if someone can't look you in the eye, then he or she is not telling the truth. However, many psychologists have found that people who can easily tell a lie are able to control eye contact very well. Though it is not always a perfect sign of honesty, eye contact is a clear way to show interest in another person. When a person looks at you and continues to do so, you can tell that she is interested in you. When she turns her head away, her mind is also away from you. Now you are not number one anymore. However, a shy person may have trouble in making and keeping eye contact, even though he or she is very interested in the other person.
49. Everyone has had the feeling of being sick. When we have a cold, we cough, sneeze, and have a runny nose. When we eat something that is old or not clean, sometimes we get an upset stomach and have to run to the bathroom. If we catch the flu, we have a fever and feel very tired. Other types of illnesses are more serious. As we get older, our bodies wear out, and we get lifestyle diseases, such as heart disease, or aging diseases, such as cancer. Why do we get these diseases? 50. When we have a cold, a virus has entered our body. Our body reacts by coughing, sneezing, and having a runny nose to get rid of the virus. However, because the virus is a living thing, it also tries to survive and reproduce. A good way of doing this is to spread itself by making the host cough, sneeze, and have a runny nose. In this way, both our bodies and the virus help each other. This example shows that the symptoms of diseases caused by viruses or bacteria are often a natural reaction that is designed to cure our body of the disease. 51. Another example is a fever. If we ask why our body heats up, it can help us to understand how a fever is really useful in fighting disease. Usually, when we get the flu, a virus has entered our body. Soon after, we develop a fever. After a day or two, the fever disappears and we begin to feel better. The fever is really a method that the body uses to kill the virus. The virus cannot survive in the oven that our body has created. In this way, the fever was really a helpful reaction that killed the virus, even though we were not happy to feel so miserable. This shows that our bodies have natural defenses. Sometimes taking medicine to reduce symptoms is not always the best solution because it interferes with the body's natural defense system.
52. People often regard dust as a big nuisance. Dust settles from the air and makes a gray coating over everything in a house. However, if they knew that dust is useful in many ways, they would be surprised. In the path of the sunbeam, there are hundreds of fine grains of dust shining like gold. Without this dust, we should be unable to see the sunbeam. The dust reflects the light and spreads it around. The dust gives us the soft, pleasant light. Without dust, there would be very strong sunshine that would be harmful to us. The higher we go up a mountain, the smaller and lighter are the grains of dust around us. These fine grains reflect only blue light. For this reason, the clear sky over the mountain appears blue. The coarse dust over an industrial city reflects white or yellow light. That is why the sky over the city does not look very blue. 53. Dust also affects the Earth's climate. The atmosphere bounces about 20% of the sun's heat back into space. This atmosphere consists of gases, dust, and water vapor. If it were not for dust, the Earth would be very hot during the day and very cold at night. The heat of the sun turns the water of the ocean into vapor, and it rises into the air. This vapor turns into the form of clouds when it comes into contact with dust and other particles. When the clouds are further cooled by meeting colder currents of air, then rain falls on the earth. But without dust in the air, this process could not take place. Vapor would not be condensed into raindrops. Therefore, were it not for the dust in the air, we should not be able to live on this earth of ours.
54. A bird's egg is a marvelous object. People have called it the most perfect thing in the universe. You will probably agree if you learn more about a bird's egg. Take a closer look at the next egg you open in the kitchen. All of its parts have very important jobs. From a hen's point of view, the egg that gets into the frying pan is a failure. Its real job in nature is to give life to another bird. This can happen only if the egg is fertilized by the male bird. The new life begins in the rich yellow globe called the yolk. The yolk provides food for the new life as it grows inside the shell. All around the yolk is the egg white. This part acts as a gentle shock absorber that protects the yolk and the developing chick. 55. The white is primarily water, but it also holds some of the foods and minerals needed to build a bird. Around the yolk and egg white is a thin, flexible skin. Another skin is tightly attached to the inside of the shell. You may notice that there is a pocket of air inside the egg, usually at its large end. When the mother bird lays her egg, there is no airspace inside it. Instead, it is filled completely by the yolk and white. But the egg cools, and as it cools, it shrinks. The shell, however, shrinks less than the inside of the egg and leaves an empty space for air between the two skins. The young chick needs to live on this air before it breaks out of its shell. It also gets some oxygen from outside the shell because the shell and the skins are not completely airtight. 56. The eggshell is an excellent package for the treasure it holds. Its curved design gives it strength. It needs to be strong enough not to break beneath the weight of the parent birds as they sit on it, but weak enough to let the young bird break out when the time comes for hatching. Why do birds lay eggs? Why do they not give birth to their young the way most animals do? As one scientist explained it, a bird, if it becomes pregnant, will be too heavy to fly. By producing her young outside her body, the mother bird is still light enough to fly when it needs to escape enemies and to find food.